this started one more time. All right. Here we go. All right, everybody. Good morning. My name is Brian Wagner. I'm the Chief Architect of Prodigio RTS. Today we're going to talk about strategy building using Perdigio's Wizard Lab. First and foremost, to learn more about what Perdigio is and the Perdigio trading platform, first and foremost, I recommend you follow us on Twitter. We've got a Twitter feed at twitter.com/wizardlab. And also check us out at our home on the web on www.perdigiorts.net. All of these videos are archived and they're available under the Video Archive section. And they're also available in the Perdigio platform itself. All of these videos are at the bottom. All of the videos are available, and you just click the button and it will launch the video in an external browser. So every week we have these chats. Every Wednesday we try to do it at 12 Eastern, 11 Central. And we try to pick a variety of topics based on feedback that we get from the users or other questions that we get, etc. Also, if you lose sound, bear with us. This capture sometimes stutters. It usually comes back pretty quickly. If not, close the window and hit watch again. But these are always archived, so you'll always be able to catch up on anything that you do miss looking at the video archives. Perdigio is the robotic trading system offered exclusively by Thinkorswim and TD Ameritrade. What you're able to do with Perdigio is you're able to create automated trading strategies without a scripting language. With Perdigio, it's a simple matter of drag and drop by creating rules which simply replaces the scripting language. The website, www.perdigiorts.net. I'm trying to get a lot covered in the chat, so bear with me as I try to get through all of this. With Perdigio Wizard Lab, you create the rule using the rule builder, you save the rule, and you put it into a strategy. And it's just a simple matter of drag and drop, setting things up, more drag and drop, saving, and then deployment. And we're going to cover that very specifically today. But please join us at our home on the web, www.perdigiorts.net. All right, so let's go back there really quick. The Perdigio website, it has our blog entries. Every time I create a strategy for the show, or somebody hosts the show and they create strategies, we try to post a blog entry where we put the saved strategy, which you can transfer by using Wiz Files. Right? And that's really the first thing that I want to talk about today. Also, in order to get the Perdigio platform, you need to request Perdigio activation. That's a simple matter of sending an email into support@thinkorswim.com. So you can call, but just send an email into support@thinkorswim.com with the subject line Perdigio activation, and make sure to include your username and account number. And what that'll do is that'll give you permission to use the Perdigio platform, and on your platform you'll get a little icon in the Trade tab. You click this, that'll launch Perdigio as a separate process, and it's also available under the gadgets as Perdigio RTS. Perdigio is fully linked to your Thinkorswim trading account. Right now, in order to trade live capital, fund a Thinkorswim trading account. So if you're a TD user, we recommend that you fund a small trading account on the Thinkorswim platform to get started and start playing around with Perdigio RTS and trade optics and start to learn the risk parameters, etc. I encourage everybody to use the import and the export tools that are available in Perdigio RTS. And the reason is because Shadow Trader is beginning to incorporate more and more strategy automation by using Perdigio Wizard Lab and sharing these strategies directly with you in the form of Wiz Files. So the first thing that I'm going to do today is cover exactly how to use Wiz Files and where to get them for Shadow Trader. Um, it's also the mechanism that Shadow Trader is using in order to share some of the strategies that those guys are working on over there. So for example, if I save a Wiz file, that's going to save this to my file system. What, say, the Shadow Trader team will do is they'll take those Wiz files and they'll post them in the newsletters. And I wanted to share with you right now an example of one of these newsletters. Here's an example of one of the Shadow Trader newsletters. This is the Shadow Trader FX Trader. Now, if you're not signed up for these newsletters, I recommend you sign up right away and start getting this content, because it's linking in strategies that are pre-made for you already in the form of Wiz files. And what they'll do in the newsletter, if you scroll down, they will have created a bunch of Wiz files. And I can just scroll down. And here's one where they've got two Forex strategies that are trading Forex ETFs. Right, they've got one here, it's called Strategy Forex EMA.wiz file, Strategy Forex Long Stochastic.wiz file. And what you can do with these is you can right click and you can say Save As. If you right click on the Wiz file, you say Save Link As. This will allow you to save the Wiz file to your local file system. And you can put it anywhere that makes sense. A lot of people just put it right inside their My Documents. If they're My Documents, that's just your home folder. You can save this strategy right in here, and now I've got it saved locally on my file system. I get a little, my browser says, okay, it's done saving the Wiz file. I've saved that stochastic strategy. I can do the same thing with the EMA, Save Link As, and now I've got those two Shadow Trader strategies that the team at Shadow Trader have been working on are saved locally onto my file system. Now that I have those saved, all I need to do is go into my Prodigio platform and I go into my Wizard Lab. Now, once more, for all of you guys who are new out there, Wizard Lab is the part inside Prodigio. It's the tab that allows you to design and build automated trading strategies. And we're going to talk a lot about how you do that, but more importantly, how you tweak the strategies and how you can combine rules together. Once you're inside Wizard Lab, you'll notice that there's a bunch of tabs for Step 1, Step 2, Step 3, Step 4. And that's old hat for people who have been using the system for a while, but these are basically the different steps in the process for how you go about building a strategy, backtesting it, and deploying it for real-time trading or real-time signal generation. Well, if I saved a Shadow Trader Forex strategy, if I go into Step 2 is your strategy builder. And let me read through these very slowly. Step 1 is the rule builder. Step 2 is the strategy builder. Step 3 is backtest, and Step 4 is deploy strategy. I'm going to talk about each one of these in detail, but in order to import the strategy, I simply go to Step 2, the strategy builder. And there's an import button right next to my export button. So Shadow Trader would have exported the Wiz file. You would have saved it on your local file system. Now I'm going to import this Shadow Trader Forex strategy. And I can go into the Strategy Forex EMA. I can select it. It's again under My Documents. I can select Open, and it says Imported Strategy Forex EMA from that strategy file. I hit OK, and now I've got it in here to use. I've got this strategy readily available, and I can go right into RTS strategies, and you'll notice I've got my Wizard Lab strategies right here. I've got this strategy available, and we'll show you how to deploy this later, but it's right there under the My Wizard Lab strategies. So that's a really convenient way to begin using Prodigio and Wizard Lab. Just sign up for the Shadow Trader newsletters, take in the strategies that they're working on or they're developing, and just start deploying those. And I'll show you how to do that right here. In Wizard Lab, there's this Step 4, deploy strategy. You can deploy to two modes, RTS strategies or trade optics. Now what RTS strategies is going to do is that's going to be your real-time trading. That's where Prodigio is going to take the strategy, it's going to run it on your account, and it's going to use all of the rules and the strategy parameters that were defined earlier on that Shadow Trader did in Step 1 and Step 2. Step 3 is backtest, and they would have backtested this strategy. So as soon as you import it, you're ready to go. And you can go into RTS strategies, and that'll give you, that'll link you right over to the RTS strategies panel. And on this panel is all of the strategies that you've been working on, all of the strategies that you've imported, and all of the strategies that are pre-built out-of-the-box strategies. Here in the My Wizard Lab strategies, as a long trading strategy, is that 4x EMA strategy that was built by Shadow Trader. Now this strategy was designed for a specific list of symbols, right? And when you deploy a strategy, you have to pick the symbol list that you want that strategy to run on. Now this is explained in the Shadow Trader newsletter, but in order to make that list, I'll go into quotes, and I'll just create a new strategy list. And this list, you can make this here. You can there's a whole bunch of other places that you can make it, but just as a shortcut, you can just make this list up by going to your quotes and start building a list. Now, if I want a new list, let me actually see if going to be in the video, but I believe they're going to have the list of symbols up here. And let me see if I can recall one of these symbols actually. Let's see. I'm looking for this symbol list here. Because again, Prodigio is designed to run off of ETFs. I'm sorry, it's an equities trading platform. And this strategy, let's see here, was designed to run on the 4x ETFs. And let's see, I'm trying to find out if they have this list here. It's definitely in the video. But yeah, it looks like they may not have that list of symbols in here. Yeah, so that list is going to be actually in the video. Let's see. Okay, here we go. I thought that's what I was looking for actually. FXA, FXB, etc., etc. Yeah, thanks guys, I appreciate that. So let's build that list in our symbol list editor. I'm going to call it my just call it 4x ETF list. Right, so we're going to put in FXA, FXB, C, etc., etc. I just wanted to make sure that I covered the majority of them. S and Y. And let's see, am I missing any here in that list that they were talking about the other day? I missed F. Okay, and I've got my list of 4x ETFs. And why not put, let's see, UUP and UDN in there as well? And so I can save this. I've got my new 4x ETF list. Right? And you can manipulate this exactly how you want. Let's see, UUP BC, right? Ah, I see. Got it. Thanks, guys. That should be FXB. See, I had that symbol wrong right there, right? So let me save this here, right? Fix that. Yep, there you go. All right, good. Thanks, guys. What I did here was I made a symbol list that represents the ETFs for trading Forex, and I'm going to just deploy that using the Shadow Trader strategy by going back into my RTS strategies panel, and now I can select this as one of the lists that I have available. So I've got this Forex ETF list right here, and deploying strategies in Wizard Lab is a simple matter of just clicking it on, and that strategy will now be deployed. And I'll turn on RTS trading. I don't know if I'll get any signals in the middle of the day, but you never know. Enabling RTS trading is a simple matter of pressing this RTS Auto Trading enabled button. Now there's a new feature. I'm running off of the pre-production server. This release I believe is coming out tonight, and it's got a couple, it's really a patch release. It has a couple new features. One of the things to really show is that when you go to deploy Perdido robotic trading, right? So let's say you got the Wiz Lab strategy from the Shadow Trader newsletter. You imported it into your platform, and then you built your Forex ETF list. You deployed your Wizard Lab strategy, and now you click this RTS Auto Trading Enabled button. That makes your platform begin robotically trading. So now the platform's hot, it's ready to go, it starts RTS trading. We've got a new feature for RTS Auto Trading Expiration, right? And so here's a request that it was really simple for us to put in. It was really just a matter of us changing the way that we do things. And what this does is this will control exactly when this button becomes disabled again. Now, the way Prodigio used to work, every day it would reset your RTS Auto Trading button. And the reason why we did this was because we wanted to make sure that the trading system, again, it's a robotic trading system, we wanted to make sure that it did not begin trading on the account without your permission, without your acknowledgement, without your control. And so what we did was we said, well, in order to turn it on, log in every day and click the RTS Auto Trading button enabled, and you're ready to go. And that'll continue robotic trading for the rest of the day. We added an expiration date to this. And what this does is this defines exactly when this button will become disabled. So some people wanted to, for example, log in on Sunday, enable RTS trading, and then let it go for the week and come back, say the next week, check on the results of the trading, and enable it for RTS trading again. This toggle right here allows you to select the expiration date. Right, so for example, if I wanted this, today's the 18th, if I wanted it to remain enabled for a week, I could just go here, I could click RTS Auto Trading Expiration Date, Wednesday, May 25th, and I can hit Apply. And what this will do is it'll give me a dialog, and it says you're permissioning automated trading to enter trades through the close of 5/25/11 or until you manually disable the RTS Auto Trading. So in other words, Prodigio robotic trading will continue trading this strategy until that expiration date occurs, and you have to acknowledge this. And so when you hit OK, it says, all right, that expires on 5/25 and it's currently enabled. Now I can disable that manually by just clicking here on the RTS Auto Trading button, and you'll see the status becomes disabled. All right, so the guys did a really nice job with this component. You can run this, for pretty much as long as you want. I'm not sure if there's an upper limit, but again, I encourage you, do it maybe week by week or month by month, etc. This will always tell you the current status. So let's turn this back on. You notice my expiration date is set back to the 25th, status enabled, and that's how you deploy strategies in Prodigio robotic trading. And it's as simple as that. And especially for people who are seeing this for the first time or are coming back in, you can take advantage of not only Shadow Trader, but also the Prodigio community. There's a lot of people who are working on various Prodigio and Wizard Lab strategies, and they'll share these on the forums. And I want to just point you to the forums. RTS.net, and we've got a section for forums. Right, the forums here, they've got a lot of discussion, a lot of posts, and some strategy sharing, some strategy optimization. Also, this is a good place to put feature requests. These forums are pretty, they're pretty actively reviewed by some of our support now. You'll notice any of the new topics show up in the new forum discussion, etc. But this is where you can place either feature requests or suggestions or share strategies, and the way you do that is exactly the same way that Shadow Trader does it with the Wiz Files. So it's very simple to get started and to begin robotically trading. And the only other thing to mention about RTS trading before I get back into the parameters of building strategies and rules, etc., is that robotic trading in Wizard Lab is managed by risk parameters. Now what I did here was I clicked on this settings button, and that's linked to the Prodigio robotic trading account, right? And you can see actively managed positions on the portfolio. Again, this is a pre-production build, so it's got some old positions on here. But it shows you all of your working positions, your working orders, etc. But this portfolio is managed according to the risk parameter settings of the account. Now, These risk parameter settings allow you to specify exactly how much risk you want to apply to the account. Now usually with robotic trading, it's to your advantage to deploy 100% of the buying power. Again, it's a robotically managed system, and so any position that comes on, especially if it has stop orders or target orders, will be subject not only to that management by the Wizard Lab server and the management according to the stop and target orders, but it's also governed by various drawdown risk settings. So for example, there's account soft drawdown and hard drawdown. Now what's soft drawdown? Soft drawdown is a Prodigio specific mechanism that we built. What that allows you to do is specify a drawdown amount for which no more robotic trading will happen. And that's opposed to hard drawdown. A lot of people might be familiar with a hard drawdown. Hard drawdown says, if the strategy loses this amount of money, and it's based on a percentage amount of the buying power. So I can tweak this, right? 1.35% would be about $1,000. Hard drawdown is going to basically shut the system off, it's going to liquidate the positions, and it's going to disable RTS trading. So that's easier to understand. Soft drawdown is more subtle. What that does is it will begin, if soft drawdown is hit, it will begin ignoring signals for new robotic positions. In other words, if you're in 5 RTS trading positions, it's going to continue to manage those positions. It's going to continue to stay in them. It's not going to liquidate them. It's not going to shut it all down. But if you get 3 more signals, for example, for 3 new positions, if the soft drawdown is in effect, that will not trade the new positions. So in other words, it kind of limits the risk with respect to getting into new positions. Then of course there's a per position drawdown. Any position that draws down in terms of P&L by more than this amount will be immediately liquidated. But you can also specify the degree to which the robotic trading system uses or deploys the buying power on the account. Now by default it's set to total buying power. That's really useful for robotic trading because it allows you to get more in terms of P&L when you're you're working more of your capital. Right? It doesn't make sense, especially if you're using a robotic trading system, to use a very, very small amount of that capital unless the account has a really, really large amount of buying power. In that case, you'll want to select one of these other options, such as a percentage. Now, this is a $150,000 account, so this is a moderately sized. Now it's paper money, right? But it's a moderately sized account. I can reduce this, and if I did only want to deploy 10% of that, I can just drop this down to 10, and it'll robotically deploy $15,000. But the reason why $15,000 might not be adequate is because that's going to limit the number of trade positions that the robotic system can find. Again, this is scanning larger symbol sets, and for this Forex strategy, what we did was exactly, this is referring to, I was referring to the newsletter before, right? And that's got the Wiz file inside of it, and that's what I pulled into Perdido for RTS trading. And that's got a list of, right now, I think I put about maybe 9 symbols up against that list. And if I'm only deploying $15,000 worth of buying power, maybe I can only get into one of those 9 positions. Maybe it finds 9 different positions, right? Well, that's going to really limit the effectiveness of the robotic trading. So it's usually good to have a moderate amount robotically traded because, once again, all these positions are governed with stops and targets and risk settings. So your drawdown limits are really bounded by these amounts. So you can manage the buying power amounts deployed. You can also manage the per trade allocation. And one of the things that I caught some of the guys on a couple times is that various per trade allocation schemes really care about the share rounding precision. Let me talk about this specifically for a minute. Per trade allocation, that says, all right, I've got my buying power. Right, I've got my $150,000 worth of buying power. How do I dice that up per position? And there's a couple strategies for how to do that. It defaults to a fixed share size. And a fixed share size says, all right, I'm only going to deploy 100 shares per position as long as I can afford it. So in other words, all these positions will be at round lots of 100 shares. But you may want it to be more portfolio weighted. And I know during the pairs trading shows on Shadow Trader, they talk about pairs weighting a lot. And it's a very simple concept. If the value of one stock is worth $400 and the value of another stock is worth $40, that's a 10-to-1 difference. So in order to kind of trade the pair in an equal kind of way, you need to kind of weight the share sizes. In other words, 100 shares of the $400 stock, I mean, that's going to cost, what is that, $40,000 to get into that position. And 100 shares of the $40 stock, that's only going to cost $4,000. Right? So your P&L is going to be skewed unless you weight them. So you might want to buy instead 1,000 shares of that $40 stock, etc. You can tweak that with these other settings. Now RTS 15, that's kind of the original scheme from the older versions of Prodigio, and it's actually a pretty good one. It's a well-rounded one. It takes 1/15 of your buying power and it buys as many shares at 1/15 of the buying power as possible. Now that's kind of equivalent to if I went to fixed percent of buying power and I set this at something like maybe 7 or 8% or 7.5%. Let me run that really quick. What is that? That would be 100 divided by 15, right? 6.66. Right? So let's say about 6.5 just to round it. These would be roughly equivalent. The 1/15 is roughly equivalent to about 6.5% of the buying power. But you don't have to go off percentage of the buying power. You can go off a fixed dollar amount. They do this a lot in the Shadow Trader too. They'll say, all right, well, always fix it at $3,000 per position, for example. Now on 150,000, that would allow me to get into quite a number of positions. But you want to be careful. This rounding precision in robotic trading defines exactly how it dices up those orders, right? And it defaults right now to hundreds. Now hundreds are round lots. Round lots tend to get filled better. But one of the very exciting things that we've been finding in this system with Perdido and with our order routing through thinkorswim and the account reconciliation, they fill odd lots very, very, very well. And that's to your distinct advantage when using robotic trading. You can set the system to trade odd lots by selecting one's share rounding position. What that's going to do is it's going to find out how many shares it can afford based on your strategy. And if that number is, let's say, 177 shares, it's going to send an order for 177 shares. Now that 177, that's kind of an odd lot because it's not an even multiple of 100. But if you specify this, that'll allow you to dice up your account in a more granular fashion, get more out of the robotic trading. So this is something that's very useful. And you can pick. You can pick round lots of 100. You can pick ones, or if you want to be a little more conservative, there's a 2 tens. That's going to round your share. So 177, that would round down. It always rounds down because it wants to make sure that it doesn't go over buying power limits. It will round down to 170 shares. So you have all of these settings in the robotic trading, and these are really important. I encourage you to set up some robotic trading strategies, use some of the ones from Shadow Trader, etc., especially the pairs ones. The pairs ones are really, really doing well. I was talking to Peter over at Shadow Trader the other day, and he was saying he just loves what the pair strategies are doing in Prodigio. So I really recommend you check out those as well. But set up an account, set up some risk parameter settings, and there's some other specific settings. There's max trade limits, so I can say things like only trade 10 positions per day, right? Or only trade up to 10,000 shares, right? If I use percentage based, that might trade, say, if it's a over-the-counter penny stock or something like that, that might trade like, say, 20,000 shares of something like that. You can limit that here, and I can just drop this to whatever I want. And then there's the max number of trades per symbol. Bump this up or disable it if you want the strategy to trade the same stock multiple times in a day. That's actually useful for some of these Forex ones. But see, I would disable this here, and I could hit apply and hit OK, and they're now applied to my robotic trading. Right, so that's about Shadow Trader and the Wiz Labs, and I really encourage you to check that out. So there's two things in particular with regard to building rules in Wizard Lab that I want to talk about today. The first one is about rules. The first one is about strategy parameters. So let's talk about the rule concept really quickly. This is about combining rules, and this is something that we've visited in the past. But let me catch some people up to speed here actually. When you work with Perdidio Wizard Lab, and now this is, for example, the work that the Shadow Trader team would have done, but it's really easy and fun to build rules inside of Perdigio's rule builder. It's a lot easier, and I find it to be a lot more satisfying than writing scripts, because it's so easy to make changes and it's so easy to insert things in the middle of things, and you can tweak things fairly easily. So let's look at the rule builder. I have in front of me a rule that I built last week, which last week I talked about using correlation as a filter. And I'm going to build on top of this. I'm going to use this in order to kind of create a composite strategy. But let me just talk about what this is really quick. When building rules in Wizard Lab, it's the same power as writing a script in a scripting language. But instead of writing code, you're dragging and dropping things together, and you're feeding them, you're chaining them together by feeding data into technical analysis studies or other math formula. So I use this analogy of a lot. You can think of this as data flowing through the system. So when you build a rule, you start with source data, and this is your input data, the things that are coming in and streaming in from our data feed, and you're running a formula on that, and you're using some logic in order to generate signals. So I talked about this last week, and it was a pretty good set of chats the last 2 weeks. They're very, in my opinion, they present some things that are very technical in a very down-to-earth vernacular kind of way. So I really liked those last two. I recommend you check those out if you have time. But all this does is, by dragging and dropping some rules, this is what I'm defining. I'm saying, take OHLC daily bars as they come into the system, and specifically take SPX daily bars. As they come into the system, what I do is I say take those bars and send them into a correlation study. A correlation, that's just a study that measures the relationship between two different stocks or securities or instruments or whatever. So what I'm doing in this case is I'm comparing SPX bars to all the other bars in my deployment symbol list that's represented by this OHLC study right here, and I'm feeding those into the inputs of the correlation study. So just like in a script where I would make a function call, or I would say go do the correlation calculation now, the way that you say that in Wizard Lab is, well, let's say I'm starting from scratch. I go into my technical analysis studies, I scroll down to the correlation study, I drag this out onto my canvas, and I say, okay, I want to do a correlation study, and I drag the outputs into the inputs, and I say run the correlation on the SPX compared with everything else, and that's how you represent that in Prodigio Wizard Lab. And this, let me open it again. I forget what the parameters was 20 periods. So I reopened that again. It was 20 period correlation. But it's just a simple matter of chaining these things together. And so I would say connect the output of the correlation into a logic operator. Right? And the logic operators are really simple. I'm saying tell me when the correlation is greater than a constant value of 0.4. And I explain all the details of this in last week's chat. But that's how you build a rule in Prodigio Wizard Lab. It's as simple as that. It's drag and drop. And what this does is it ends in a signal. And that trading signal is what I use in order to govern how the robotic system will trade on my account. So I take all these signals and I tie them together. And the way I tie those signals together, and they're all saved under my rules. I have 2 on this account right now. But I tie those together by building a strategy, and a strategy says use this rule as my scanning rule, use these rules as my management rules, etc., etc., and you can kind of chain these things together. You know, so I can put multiple orders in here. You know, I can put multiple rules in here, and I can say scan based on a rule and then manage based on a series of rules or other orders. Right? So that's the concept, right? And we're going to talk about details. So when building rules, right, and this is the first subject, sometimes these rules can get pretty complicated. Now, this one wasn't so complicated. I think the other one had more rules in it, actually. So I imported that Forex EMA strategy. Let me import the other shadow trader rule by going to my Step 2 strategy builder, clicking the import button, and I'll go to strategy, FX long stochastics, and it says it imported that strategy, FX long stochastic, and it imported it. Let me open it, strategy, FX long stochastic, and I've got this strategy, and it's got this rule associated with it, stochastic long entry. Right, so let's take a look at stochastic long entry. I'm right-clicking and I'm saying open. Right, and there's a little bit more meat to this one. Now, some of these can get really big, and my goal here today is to show you how to keep these manageable. You keep the rules manageable when they get too big by chaining them together by using the my rules, and we call this rule combining. Right, so here's one that has a couple of parts in it. I can actually take this rule and I can dissect it into its different parts, and I'm going to do that for you today. So I start with a rule, right, and this has some logic. Now let's look specifically. This is looking at a stochastic %D study. It's finding out when that's less than 20, less than or equal to 20. And it's also using a stochastic %D with a %K, and it's looking for crosses. Wizard Lab has a cross above and cross below operator, which will fire signals when, for example, if you're looking at a chart, and this is old hat for a lot of you guys, but again, I want to make sure that pretty much everybody gets the gist of this. If I have two different speeds of moving averages, and let's change the color on this. So let's make that a cyan, make it a little thicker. Let's make that a little thicker as well. The cross operator will find any time two different study values cross against one another. And so, here's an example where I've got two moving averages crossing. When this event happens, you can capture that using Wizard Lab, using the cross above, cross below, or the cross operators. Now, cross below is used, for example, if you want this cyan line to cross below the yellow. Cross above can be used if you want the yellow to cross above the cyan, and cross will fire if either of them happen. So let's take this rule and let's break it down. I notice on the far right hand side I've got an AND study. Now, AND is a logical operator, which means both inputs have to be firing signals at the same time. And this is great when you want to add filters to the rule. So you want to say, all right, well, my RSI is less than 30, and my stochastics is less than 20, and my CCI crossed in the last 20 periods. And you would do that with an occurs within study. You could find out if something happened in the past 20 periods using occurs within. Anytime you see an AND or an OR, those are prime candidates for breaking your strategy down. Right, so let's see how we can do this here. This is the whole strategy. It's not very big, but it's got a couple parts to it. And again, this is the Forex stochastic long entry strategy right from the Shadow Trader Forex newsletter. And what I'll do here is I'll break this apart into two parts. I'll break this apart by saying I'm going to take the top branch, and this is going to be a condition. I'm going to call this my stochastic %D less than 20 condition. I'm going to save this as its own rule, and then I'm going to reuse that saved rule as the first input to the AND. So I kind of broke it apart from the AND, and instead of using this, which again it's only 1, 2, 3, 4 different studies in the rule, but I'm still going to do this anyway just for demonstration, because you can build really complicated rules, and if you do that, it makes it much more manageable if you break it down. So let's take this part and let's save this part first. All right, so I want to get rid of everything else. Right, so I'm dragging my mouse and I'm hitting the delete button, or you can right click and you can hit delete, and that'll remove everything that you have selected. And what I have here is I have just that top branch of the rule. And again, this is just nothing more than a sequence of taking source data, feeding it into math formulas or studies and applying some kind of logic to generate a signal. What I'll do is I'll go to my trade actions, and right now I've got this signal trade action. This is basically your ending condition, right? And I'm going to feed this into the signal. And what I'll do is I'm going to save this as something else. So this is just using stochastic. I'm going to call it stochastic %D below 20. Right, so I've got this rule and it shows up in the My Rules. Right, and all this is saying is fire signals whenever this stochastic is below 20. So that's going to continually fire signals as long as that stochastic is below the threshold. So on my chart here, I can bring up stochastic, and I'll put on here, let's see, I think I had a 9 and a 5 or something like that. Oops. And pretty much every time this %D down here, which is the red line, every time it's below this 20 line, that's going to give me signals. So it's going to keep giving me signals on this bar, on that bar, on that bar, on that bar, etc. As long as it's below this green dashed line, it's going to be firing signals. So I save this as its own rule. And I'm glad somebody brought this up actually. Right now, when you use My Rules, they work on logic by chaining logical signals together. You'll notice that the system has more than just logic values in it. Logic is anything that ends with this TF. This TF stands for true false. There's also things that work on values, numerical values. We are planning on opening the My Rules up so that you can chain arithmetical values into one another by using the My Rules. So that is something that we're working on. So I took the top branch, I saved that as its own rule. Let me open up the original strategy again, and now I'm going to do the same thing for the bottom branch. So instead of using this top branch, I'm going to do the exact same thing for the bottom branch, and I'll take a little shortcut here. I've already got a signal, so I'll just move that over. And here's the bottom branch. Right? I can move this up. You know, you can always hit Control A. Control A is going to select everything, and you can drag it like that. But this is firing me signals when this stochastic %D on the 30-minute crosses above the daily. Right? And so I can save this as stochastic %D cross above daily. Cross above day. Right, and I've got another rule which is called stochastic %D cross above day. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use these two parts in my bigger rule. Right, so let's go back to the bigger rule one more time. And instead, right, you'll notice this ends in that signal of off. Instead of using the top branch, which I had previously saved as stochastic %D cross below 20, I'm going to delete that, and I'm just going to replace it with the single study that I had saved before. And this represents that larger branch of studies. I'm going to do the same thing for the bottom, and I can just remove these one by one as another way to do it. And I'll use this stochastic %D cross above day as my lower condition. And now what I've done, let me drag this over, I've taken a much bigger rule and I've used combined rules in order to make it much simpler. And this is much easier to manage, so I can save this. This is much easier to manage because now if I break it apart into its constituents, I can just open up one of these and I can, this is a little easier to read and to digest and to tweak. If I want to change this from 20, if I want to raise it up to 25, etc., that's very easy to do now. And as soon as I tweak this, the changes automatically apply to the master rule. This is now referred to as the master rule because it's got combined rules inside of it. It's taking my rules and it is chaining them together into this master rule, and I've now got a simpler to manage, easier rule that works exactly the same way as it did if I had all of those rules built out into one large canvas. So this is a tip which will allow you to kind of build filters. It's really great for filters or for scans. And when you have a master rule set up like this, I can do one more trick. I can easily add more filters into it. we are working on folders on my rules. I'm actually working on some of that right now, actually. There's a lot to it because you have to manage kind of, it's almost like a file system. Yes, I am working on this currently myself, so you've got that coming. Correlation scan, this is the rule that we used as a filter last week, and I had mentioned that you can use this as a filter, right? So you drag this out, right, and I can add this, right? I need another AND condition, right? I can chain these ANDs together like this, and it's as simple as that to add another filtering criterion to your master rule. And see how easy that is? I have my master rule, and I can put all of my ANDs or my ORs in the master rule, and that's much easier to manage. You know, if I save this, this is no longer the shadow trader strategy because I applied this correlation scan, and this correlation, it's comparing it to the SPX, so that probably doesn't make a whole lot of sense for what he's doing here, but you could imagine how you can rewrite this correlation scan to look at Forex ETFs, etc. Right? So that's pretty much it for the combined rules. Right? Now I want to go over and talk about how you use those in strategy, specifically about the various parameters, and maybe clear up some questions about the strategy parameters. So again, in Prodigio Wizard Lab, when you build a rule and you save this set of rules, you take these and go into step 2, strategy builder. Now again, I'm looking at the Forex. Actually, this is the EMA entry strategy. Let's open up that stochastic one. Right. Oh no, I'm sorry. I am looking at yeah, see where it says here strategy FX long stochastic? Right? That was the description. Again, anything that you save as the description is going to show up here under the description panel. So let's take a look at this. There's a lot going on in the strategy builder, and I want to break this down for you one by one. I also want to illustrate a new feature that's coming out in this patch build, which is going to solve a lot of ambiguity and a lot of headaches for a lot of people. And we're glad that we can finally offer those. The strategy builder has a lot in it. First of all is this panel on the side. This panel on your side contains both your scanning and your management rules. Right? And now the first source of confusion sometimes, and we are going to change this to make this a little simpler to understand. A strategy is built in terms of 3 parts. A scanning rule, rules that add to the position, and rules that close or liquidate the position. Anything that goes in the scanning rule should be selected from the scanning section over here in the rules toolboxes. So this panel over here quite simply has the toolboxes containing all of the my rules. Anything that you drag over into the scanning rule, now notice this is using stochastic long entry, has to be dragged from the scanning section. So if I drag this out and I drop this here, it's okay, everything's happy. If I accidentally drag it from the management section, it's not going to allow me. It's going to say no, you know, it's not allowed to drop there, etc. There is a reason why we did this. We're making some changes to add more features, which is kind of going to change us in the near future. But in the meantime, make sure you're pulling scanning rules from the scanning box up top. Right, so here's the stochastic long entry. Right, now conversely, anything that you want to be managed has got to come from the management section. And you see in management it's got an extra toolbox, this order rules. That's kind of related to this reason. It's a technical reason. It's not important to talk about it. But anything that you want to put into the management sections, and let me clear this out, should come from the management side. Right, and so here I put one in add to position, and here I'm going to put one into close position. Right, so all this does is this defines how to build the strategy. So let's take it from the top, right, the scanning rule. The scanning rule is the Wizard Lab rule that indicates when the trade should be triggered. Now this is also what triggers the rules signals into the trade optics panel. And I didn't talk a lot about trade optics. Maybe I should mention this briefly here. Step 4 also has the deploy to trade optics. That goes over to the trade optics panel, and if I expand this pre-built design scans up here, I get a panel which is very similar to the RTS strategies panel. Now this works in much the same way as the RTS strategies panel works, but the signals instead of going into the RTS strategies for robotic trading, that's going to populate these trade scan alerts. And I can actually just plug some of these in right now. I know I have a couple that are fairly active, and they're really good for demonstration because they start trading almost right away. Let's see, Prodigio strategy. Well, actually, that's on my other account, but I can put in something here. Let me run this on, say, like one of the S&P sets. We'll see if this does anything. I forget what my strategy has in it. But when this fires signals, in other words, when the scanning rule triggers, this will populate the trade scan alerts. And this is what a lot of you have been working with. This will populate the queue, and you can just push the button in Trade Now in order to link it not only to your order management, which is down here, but it'll also link it into the Chart Trader Pro as the primary chart. So getting back to the strategy builder, this scanning rule is what drives Prodigio's robotic trading, and this is the first entry point in terms of getting in and out of position. And I'm glad somebody brought up about charts. That's one of the big builds we're working on right now. It's in the works. There's a lot more to do, but we're going to have an extremely elegant coupling between Wizard Lab and the charting that's going to provide features that are not currently available in the system. We're really excited about it. But again, that's something that's in the works right now. So let's take a closer look at the parameters of these strategies, and you can do a lot here. So I double-clicked on the Wizard Lab tab at the top, and that put the Wizard Lab panel on the entire platform. So it expanded this panel to the entire platform. I also collapsed this toolbar on the left-hand side. That gives me a little more room to work with and allows me to more easily demonstrate exactly what's going on here. Now, a scanning rule. When you save these strategies, they are biased to a side. They're either going to go long and they're going to go short. If you have a strategy that you want to go long and short, create 2 copies of the strategy and have one set to trade side buy, that's going to go long on positions, have the other set to trade side sell, and that's going to go short on the positions. The reason why we do it this way, and this is on purpose, is because most of the time your rules do not have inverse logic. And here's an example that I started explaining to people a long time ago, and it makes a lot of sense if you think about it. Let's say I had an RSI based rule, right? Or RSI I find easier to explain. So let me pull up the RSI, right? And this is just a simple 10-period RSI, and I've got I'm moving it up so you can see it a little bit better. Let's say I have a short overbought condition on the RSI. Right? Now RSI is considered generally overbought when it goes up above 70. And I could create a rule very easily in Wizard Lab. I'll show you how I would do it. Right? This is exactly how it would be. I would just say, and this once you really get used to using Wizard Lab, you'll see how fast you can put these things together. Right? I'm dragging this out, and this is exactly how quickly you can do this. Right? And I know I want to use RSI. Now I'm screaming fast here because I'm not trying to explain what RSI is. I'm not trying to really build a strategy. I'm really just illustrating a point. And my point is to build that rule, and it's on the 1 minute, is as simple as that. I can create a complete rule in, that was a matter of, I was talking over, but that took maybe 20 seconds, 30 seconds, something like that. It's very easy to put these things together. That's what that RSI would look like. But if I were building this rule in Wizard Lab, notice I'm saying cross above, I missed that, cross above 70, right? If I was going to go short on this kind of rule, and if my strategy said to go short, well, the opposite strategy, what would the opposite strategy be? Well, one way to think about it is if I'm going short when I'm overbought, when the RSI is above 70, the opposite would be go long when I'm oversold, right? And it's oversold, generally considered, when it dips below 30 on the RSI here. That's considered to be oversold, right? So the opposite of the strategy to go short when I'm overbought is to go long when I'm oversold. Well, the problem with that is Wizard Lab is an environment that allows you to create any combination of rules and any combination of logic. So the only way for Prodigio or for Wizard Lab to interpret the opposite of crossing above 70 would have to be crossing below 70. And that's certainly not the opposite of your rule, is it? Crossing above 70 to go short, that's not right if I say cross below 70 to go long. That's completely wrong. That's not the opposite. And so because of reasons like that, and there's many more examples of that, you need to think about what's happening in your rule, which requires you to build a separate strategy for long and a separate strategy for short. You can always run them at the same time. And you can always pair the logic so that when one fires, the other doesn't fire, and vice versa. Right? And we're usually here in the chat room to kind of help you with some of that logic. If you want to build a strategy, and if you want to create something which is inversely long versus short, and if you're having a little bit trouble setting up the rules in Wizard Lab, just come into the Prodigio chat. We're here during the work days, and we try to give you some instantaneous feedback. Now, if you have a more specific question related to your account, make sure you send those questions in to prodigio@thinkorswim.com. That's the help desk. Those guys do a great job, especially for kind of account-related questions. They'll get back to you. They're very busy over there. But if you ever want a quick question just about rules or logic or Wizard Lab or rule building, just jump in this chat room and there will be somebody here at Prodigio to kind of hopefully give you some answers. And of course, there's always the forums. But when you create the parameters of your strategy, you specifically pick the long or short side. And then the only other thing to do after that is to fill in your order parameters. And this is kind of topic 2 for the day. To fill in your order parameters, the first thing that you select is the order type. Now when you go into a scanning rule, you don't have as many options as for managing a rule. You can go in at market. You'll notice most of the things are grayed out at market. Or you can go in at limit, and limit gives you some more options. Now I'm going to cover all of these things in detail. You can also enter a buy stop or a buy stop at limit. And these are more sophisticated rules, but this kind of allows you to set price triggers right from the order. So what would happen if you were going to use a buy stop to get into a position? Now a buy stop, the concept of a buy stop is where you want to, let's say you want to go long on this position. I want to go long in this position, but I want to wait until price breaks out above, let's say 340.10 on Apple. Right? And that's right about here. A buy stop would be placed to buy shares of the stock at this price, and it's not going to trigger, it's not going to execute until price breaches that buy stop. That's a very clever way to set price break thresholds based on a tick for tick process in Perdido Wizard Lab. So if you want things evaluating tick for tick, of course all of the orders are built and executed tick for tick, and so you can easily add that as an extra condition, an intelligent extra condition, by using a buy stop to get into positions. The opposite of that would be a sell stop, where you're not in position, but you want to short once it breaches, say, 339.60 cents. You could put a sell stop right here, and that would get in position if price dips below that stop. Right? But getting back, let's start with market. Right? If you look at the market order, now there's the first parameter I want to bring your attention to is there's something called cool off period. And this is a really cool feature that we added a short while ago. But cool off period allows you to throttle the signal. So let me give you an example. Let's say you have a very frequent trader that's trying to, or a trading strategy that's trying to kind of scalp things based on, say, an RSI or a Bollinger Band or a standard deviation, etc. What you can do is you can throttle back the frequency of getting in and out of position on a per stock basis. This is always on a per stock basis. If I say cool off by 1 minute, that guarantees that I won't get into another position on the same symbol until it's waited at least 1 more minute. This is a layer of protection to make sure that you don't have kind of a logical error that could double trigger in too short of a time frame. Now this can be as long as you want. You can cool off say 15 minutes or an hour and 15 minutes, etc. But what this will do is it will throttle the execution of the signal so that it has to time out by that amount before it gets into another position on the same symbol. Right? And that's available for any kind of order type. But let's say instead of market, I select limit. Now what happens is it allows me to specify the position relative parameters for limit orders. Right? So let's talk about this because this is where it becomes more detailed. First is there's the time in force. And the time in force is the duration by which you want this order to be in effect. Now, day orders on limit are going to be valid for the day and they'll cancel at the end of the day. You'll notice down here, order expires at the end of the day. And I'm going to talk about this example pane in a second. You can also specify a GTC, which I believe is the default. That's just the time in force for an order. And then what you have to do is specify the position relative parameters for the limit order. Now there's the limit order parameters and there's the limit timeout. Right? Now let's talk about both of these in the context of the example. Prodigio is a scanning system. It's a robotic scanning system. As such, it finds trades in real time and it finds them on a symbol list. So before we built a symbol list by going into quotes and we built this FX ETF list, and let's see, okay, so it's up here at the top. We built this FX ETF list, and I like to use quotes to edit these symbol lists because, you know, I could just add in another one right here and that adds it in right away. But anyway, that's not Forex related, so let's take it out. What I like to point out is that the Perdido robotic system, it's running scans on this list of symbols, and all of these ETFs are trading at different prices. You see, some are, you know, at 106. This, you know, UUP is down here at $21. They're all at different prices. In other words, it doesn't make sense to manually set limit orders when you build the strategy, right? Because if I'm scanning all 9 of these, and I think there's 9. Let's see, is my counting off? Nope, that looks like 9. 3, 3, and 3, right? That's 9. It's scanning all 9 of these stocks. So if I say buy at limit at $22, that makes sense for UUP, but that makes absolutely no sense for FXS. It makes no sense at all. So the way that we manage this in Prodigio's strategy builder is we make all of these rules relative, and they're relative according to a reference price. Now, usually that reference price is the entry price of the position. Right? So let's say I bought FXS at market right here. Right? And that's actually, let's see. Yeah, I should be able to forward that on the account. FXS. All right, let's buy that at market. And I'm going to get in. Now, the current market price is somewhere near 158.35. Right? So let's send that in. Right? That filled. Right? And let's find out where it filled me at. FXS filled me at 158.18. So that was actually a favorable fill in this case. It filled me at 158.18, and what this is this is the entry price for my position. Strategy Builder uses this entry price as the relative price in order to dictate where the orders should be placed. Right? And actually, when I'm talking about scanning, it can't pick the entry price because if you're scanning, you don't have a position yet. If you're scanning, you've only got a couple things to look at. You can look at the last, the bid, or the ask. Now we expect to be able to offer more, such as, you know, technical indicators, etc. But if you look at the last price, you know, in this example, that would actually be this 158.35. You know, if I round up, 158.35, and these offsets are relative to this price. So it says send a limit order, price at the last, right? 138.35. What's my offset? Well, if I want to buy, right, maybe I want to have price improvement. So maybe I want to buy 1 penny above that. That would send a limit order to buy at 158.36, rounding up. Now it would send it at 35.99, but it's a 1 penny offset above it. I can set it at a percentage based offset. And in order to get an idea of what it's actually going to do, we've provided this example pane. And this is one of the most important parts of this parameter builder. It says, for example, rule triggers at $50. Now we picked 50 just as a general representative number. This could be anything. This could be $158.35. It could be $21.28, whatever that was. But it says, for example, if it triggers at $50, right, it's going to, see I have selected here the percentage-based offset, 0.05%. It's going to send a limit order to buy at $50.02. It allows you to get an idea for what happens here when I tweak these offsets. Now, these offsets can go positive or negative, right? If I send the limit order below the market price, I'm sorry, that's actually price improvement. I apologize, I was showing you a technique which is sometimes referred to as stepping in front, right? If the market price is at $50, you could also step in front of the bid and the offer, etc. If I put a limit order to buy in at $50.01, I have a much greater chance that that'll fill right away because I'm stepping in front of the market price. There's a greater chance that there's another trader on the other side willing to take that price. But then there's the other side of that coin, and that's price improvement. In order to do price improvement, I need a negative offset. And this example gives you an example, to be redundant, of exactly how that's going to work. So that's going to send a limit order to buy at $49.99, and that's going to possibly have price improvement. Right? And so this example is really important because it tells you what's going on. So I'll give you another example. It says the bid and the ask is locked right now at $49.98 and $50.02. Right? So let's say I peg it, I want to buy, right? And let's say I want to peg it to the offer, right? Notice the offer, the ask is $50.02. So right now it's pegged to the offer, $50.02, but let's say I want to have price improvement, right? And so I toggle the offset down by a penny, and now what I'm doing is I'm reaching across to the offer, but I'm still improving my price a little bit. It allows you to peg and to tweak however you want, and that's what this example pane does for you. Now, in addition, there is a timeout feature. When you're robotically trading, what can happen with a limit order is price can run away from that limit order, and you could have a hanging limit order that never fills. So for example, if I have this FXS, let's say I wanted to buy another 100 shares, right? But I wanted to buy this for a price, let me change this to limit, a price that's well below the market. Right? So this is well below on the dollar, 158. If I send that limit order, right, it's sent and it's working, and if I go into my order book, I can see this order in my working orders. Now that's to buy at 158, and right now nobody wants to trade at that price for me. But what I can do is, what might happen, right? Here's my limit order. You can see this on Chart Trader Pro, and I love this feature. You can actually change this order by just dragging and dropping the order. I love that. It's beautiful. This may never fill because price might never retreat back down to here. And that's sometimes not good for a robotic system because if price runs away from it, that limit order may never fill, and that might be hanging out there for hours. Well, in Strategy Builder, you can specify a timeout, and you can say if that doesn't fill intraday in, let's say, 15 minutes, this is hours, minutes, seconds, right? Right? If that doesn't fill within 15 minutes, it's going to cancel that automatically. And so that's extremely useful because you can use the robotic system to seek price improvement, and in the event that price runs away, you can time out that limit order and limit your exposure, to whatever you feel comfortable with. And if you're looking for something on a much quicker time interval, certainly 3 minutes is going to be acceptable if you're trying to get price improvement. After 3 minutes, depending on your strategy, perhaps the trading opportunity is no longer there, or perhaps it is, depends on your technique. Or perhaps you have a much longer threshold. Maybe you have a swing strategy, and maybe that swing strategy can accept the fill within the hour. You can just change that to timeout within an hour, and it will continue to work that limit order for an hour after it's firing, and then it will cancel it if it doesn't get filled. Right, now let's move on to a stop order. Right, now a stop order, it acts exactly the same way as the limit order, but instead of being over here and specifying your order parameters, it's specifying what we call your order algorithm parameters. Right, that's why it's over here. We always gray out what doesn't make sense. Right, so this makes the stop parameters hot, and you can activate these according to last bid and ask. And what's different about the stop orders, and this is one of the features that we've added, is that you can no longer place stop orders on the sides that don't make sense. Right? Now, it's still important to know the difference between positive and negative offsets, right? Because if I'm looking at limit orders can have positive and negative offsets, and the example pane makes this immediately obvious as to what it's going to do. But for stop orders, it doesn't really make sense to have a stop order on the other side, on the wrong side of the last price. What would happen is that would execute immediately. It would effectively become a market order, which is virtually useless. So we blocked the sides for you that does not make sense. And you should see this starting tomorrow, with our patch release. And the same for the percents as well. But not only that, right? And again, let me read an example here, right? A buy stop at positive 0.1%, right? If it was trading at $50, it's going to send a buy stop at $50.05, as simple as that. But let's go down here and let's say as part of my management I have an order rule for the stop. Now these will behave identically to the scan, but they'll always be tied to the opposite side. So if I was running a long strategy to buy the stop on the stochastic long entry, in my management close position, if I have a stop order, that's always going to be tied to the opposite the opposite side, right? So if I change this to sell, that becomes buy, right? If I change this to buy, that becomes sell. And what we've done by limiting these sides, right? Now a sell stop has to be negative, right? And you can see this price dipping down. It's got to protect it on the downside. If I happen to change this to a sell, it's going to immediately invert this to positive, and it's basically going to do the thinking for you. So all you've got to do when specifying parameters for buy and sell stops is just toggle this up and down, and if something doesn't make sense, it's going to restrict you from doing this. So it's basically going to protect you from putting in an order that doesn't make sense. So that's a really cool feature that we added to this. And with the stop order, other than specifying where the stop should trigger at, which is over here, the last thing you can do is you can specify a stop limit. And stop limit now has everything activated. It's got both the stop parameters and the limit order parameters. What will happen on a stop limit is these parameters will define when the order triggers, and when it triggers, the difference is a stop order becomes a market order. So market order, you don't need any of these limit timeouts. The market order will fill right away. But if a stop order triggers into a limit order, you can specify the offset parameters of this limit order. So again, you can look for price improvement, you can time out that limit order, etc. And you can do the exact same things over on the management side. You have stop and stop limit over on the management side. Now getting over to the management side, there's some additional order types. There's target and trailing stops. Now what a target does is a target, it's like the inverse of a stop order. And yes, we have trailing stop here under the management side. You can't have a trailing stop to enter the position, but it is available inside of the management position. So let's first take a quick look at target. Target is a really interesting, unique order type available to Perdijo because it's the opposite of a stop order. And what this does is it acts exactly like a stop order but in the other direction. So in other words, let's take a look at this chart again. The way you can think about, and let's bring up AAPL because it's kind of easy to digest, right? Because it's very active. With the Apple chart here, let's say I'm long on this position and let's buy it because I'd really like to illustrate this actually. Let's go long on Apple with the market. And over here you'll notice we've got this target price and stop price. Now the stop price is really easy to understand. That's like your protective stop, right? And I can set it by just placing that order just like that. And I can actually specify a target price by putting it up there like this. Okay, and so those orders are out there working. And let's see if I can see, oh, I placed them on FXS. Yeah, I placed them on the wrong instrument actually because I was actually tied to FXS. So let's change this. Let's see here. Let's try to get this tied. There we go. I just have to click on it the right way. So let's put a stop underneath it, and let's put a target pennies above that. Okay, so this blue line is my target. And let me move this up. What this does is I'm long on the position in Apple, and it's an order that works just like a stop, except that it's going to wait. And now actually my stop order just executed. You saw the chart dip low and it hit my stop order. So let's run that again, and I'll be a little bit more lenient. Let's get back into Apple. Let's put this stop way. Let's not use a stop. Let's just use a target. The target order is going to sit above the position for long positions. And on my Chart Trader Pro, if price rises up to this target order, it's going to act exactly like a stop order. It'll either trigger at market or it will trigger at limit. And I can use the same parameters that I use for a stop order just on the other side. And you can almost think of this as a bracketed order. Right? So we use targets a lot inside of the Wizard Lab. Yeah, I really should go short on AAPL right now. Let's reverse it. Let's reverse it. Let's sell 200 at market, right? So that's going to flip me around. Oh, no. At the moment on pre-production here, it's telling me it's hard to borrow, so I can't do it. That may not be true on the production system. But I've got target orders, and you can think of this exactly like a stop. And you'll notice, like when I change between stop and target, the only thing that changes is this offset goes from negative to positive. That's it. That's it. I'm sorry, target market. Now, target limit has a limit order associated with it, and that acts exactly like the stop limit. All right, so these are all just more order types doing the exact same thing using the parameters that I just described. But finally, we have the trailing stop. And the trailing stop works again exactly like a stop, except that it is implied that the stop will trail the market price. So whereas a stop order would be fixed, if I was at a fixed offset of 20 cents below, the trailing stop is going to rise with market price. And if it gains profits, it will capture those profits up to 20 cents off of the highest market price. So again, no need to explain again the limit and stop parameters. They're the same as the stop order or the target order. They will just execute differently. And the feature that we added was we added restrictions on the offsets so that you can't add something that doesn't make sense. For example, it doesn't allow you to add a positive trailing stop. It doesn't let you do that anymore. So that's pretty cool. That'll help with a lot of different things. But that's it for strategy parameters. The only other thing that I didn't talk about is you can change your percentages. Usually we default it to 100%, but you don't have to have 100% trailing stop. You could say 50% trailing stop. That will sell half the position. So if I'm long 200 shares and I've got a 50% stop and that triggers, that will send the stop order in for 100 shares. It's percentage based so that you can apply this in a general fashion across any set of symbols and any set of risk parameter settings. So with that, I hope this sheds light on some of the parameters and the ways that you can tweak these parameters in the strategy builder, and I hope that I gave you some more tips as to how you can actually use the rules in combination with one another to kind of clean up very large strategies and make them simpler to work with. I have a question about trailing stops for getting into position. That's actually an interesting idea if you have the trailing stop underneath the position. That might be doable, but we'd have to discuss the logistics of it. That might very well be doable. I recommend you send in some ideas about how it would work, either into the chat here during the day or on the forums or right into support. Right into Prodigio at thinkorswim.com. But with that said, I'm going to let you guys go for today. I hope this was an enlightening conversation. I hope it showed some of the newer people what we can actually do with this system, and I hope it gives you an indication on where we're headed with some certain things. Although we didn't talk too much about that, I hope I give you kind of some clues as to the things that we're working on behind the scenes over here on the dev team. So with that said, follow us on Twitter, twitter.com/wizardlab. Make sure you check us out on www.perdigiorts.net. Join the forums. As always, this video session will be archived under the video archive. It'll also be available on the Perdidio platform. we're going to have one of these every week at noon, so you can always join us. And again, if you have quick questions about strategy development, just join us here in the chat room. We're here during market hours. Get Prodigio activation. See this message here in the chat. In order to get activated, send an email into support@thinkorswim.com with the subject line Prodigio activation. Once you have it, you can log in right from your TOS account. And again, we recommend you fund a TOS account if you're coming over from TD, just to start taking advantage of the live trading, because that's really what Prodigio is most competent for. So with that said, thanks everybody for joining me today. It's always a pleasure, and I hope everyone has a great day trading and for the rest of the week. So with that said, everybody, will see you next week. Take care.